Greetings from the California Museum in Sacramento. We are so glad that you could join us as we celebrate the induction of the 18th class of the California Hall of Fame. I'm California First Partner Jennifer Siebel Newsom.
And I'm California Governor Gavin Newsom.
We are here in the Hall of Fame exhibit to pay tribute to a remarkable group of individuals whose lives and legacies have left an indelible mark on our state and beyond.
Throughout their lives, each of these honorees represented the spirit of California, embodying values like innovation, justice, and resilience. They pushed boundaries, transcended societal norms, and inspired progress in ways that continue to resonate with people everywhere.
And this year, we are especially thrilled to honor the first all-female class of the California Hall of Fame. Recognizing these extraordinary women brings us closer to fully reflecting California's diversity and the incredible contributions of women.
Their stories remind us that in California, anything is possible. These leaders have impacted fields as diverse as science, arts, sports, and social justice, showing that no goal is out of reach in the Golden State.
And although these trailblazers are no longer with us, their contributions have shaped California and the world in ways that will continue to inspire for generations to come.
And without further ado, the 18th class of the California Hall of Fame.
Alice Piper, Native American rights activist who fought for educational equity.
Diane Fossey, pioneering primatologist and conservationist.
Ina Coolbrith, trailblazing poet, librarian, and cultural force.
Julia Child, iconic cook and cultural ambassador for culinary arts.
Mitsuya Endo, civil rights hero who fought to end the Japanese-American incarceration.
Tina Turner, legendary rock and soul singer.
And Victoria Draves, groundbreaking Olympic diving champion.
Now let's take a closer look at the remarkable lives and lasting impact of these honorees.
Alice Piper was just 15 years old when she was denied admission to a new public high school in Big Pine because a separate school for Native American children existed nearby.
Refusing to accept this injustice, Alice and 6 other Paiute tribe members sued the school district, arguing that Indian school lacked the resources possessed by the new school and was therefore not equipped to provide the same quality education.
The case, Piper versus Big Pine, reached the California Supreme Court, which unanimously ruled in Alice's favor, changing the educational landscape for Native students.
This victory set a precedent that was cited by Chief Justice Earl Warren in the landmark Brown versus Board of Education decision, enshrining Alice's legacy in the fight for educational equity.
Alice Piper was a civil rights pioneer who won the right to equal education for California's Native American children. Alice was 15 years old in 1923 when a new public high school opened in her community of Big Pine, California. She applied for admission, but she was denied because there was a separate school nearby that Native American children were expected to attend. Along with 6 other members of her Paiute tribe, Alice and her family sued the school district on the grounds that her constitutional right to an equal education was being violated. She and her attorneys argued that the Indian school lacked the resources of the new public school and couldn't provide the same quality of education. The court case, Piper versus Big Pine, worked its way into the California Supreme Court, where the justices unanimously ruled in her favor. The victory was a turning point in the struggle for Native American education. After that, it was no longer legal in California for public schools to bar Native children. Thanks to the ruling, Native students had access to quality education when government-funded Indian boarding schools began closing. Since the early 1800s, the U.S. government had forced hundreds of thousands of indigenous children into these schools, whose mission was to erase the students' native languages and cultures. As awareness of the terrible harm the schools caused grew in the 20th century, waves of students began returning home, needing public schools they could attend. But Alice's impact went beyond Native American children. The case was cited as a precedent by Chief Justice Earl Warren when the U.S. Supreme Court ruled against racial segregation of schools in the landmark Brown versus Board of Education case of 1954. A century after Alice's triumph in court, the Big Pine Paiute tribe and the local school district memorialized her with a statue placed at the entrance of the Big Pine High School. Now students are greeted each day by the face of the girl who would not be denied.
Bay Area native Dian Fossey found her calling in the mountains of Central Africa, dedicating herself to the conservation of the mountain gorilla.
Dian's passion for wildlife ignited when she met renowned anthropologists Louise and Mary Leakey, and this led her to Africa in 1966, where she began her pioneering research on gorillas.
Through her observations, Dian reshaped the narrative around these remarkable creatures, showcasing their gentle, complex nature and their similarities to humans. And as she witnessed the threats the gorillas faced, Dian took a stand against poaching and habitat loss, ultimately becoming a fierce protector through her organization, the Dian Fossey Gorilla Fund.
Her untimely death did not silence her voice. It amplified her legacy, continuing to inspire conservation efforts to this day.
Although she was born and raised in the Bay Area, Dian Fossey made her mark on the world in the remote mountains of Central Africa, where she helped save one of humanity's closest animal relatives. An unhappy childhood drew young Dian more to animals than people. Her love of animals led her to Africa, where an encounter with eminent anthropologists Louise and Mary Leakey inspired her to study elusive mountain gorillas. In the mid-1960s, Dian set up the Karasoki Research Camp near the Virunga volcano chain in Rwanda. That would be her primary home for much of the next 18 years. Dian's painstaking research, along with photos published in National Geographic, showing her with the gorillas, helped change our image of the animals from aggressive beasts to gentle giants who share much of our social behavior. But Dian's efforts were not strictly scientific. Her time in Rwanda made her acutely aware of many of the threats to the gorillas' survival, including human encroachment on their habitat and poaching. Dian began seeing her role as the gorilla's protector, especially after the brutal killing of a gorilla she named Digit. In response, she created the organization that would become the Dian Fossey Gorilla Fund, and she began a campaign of active conservation, including the creation of patrols whose job was to destroy traps and apprehend poachers who entered the forest. In 1980, she took leave from Karasoki to write the book Gorillas in the Mist, which chronicled her years in the jungle with her community of mountain gorillas. The book became an international bestseller and an Academy Award-nominated film. Shortly after returning to her research camp, Dian was murdered. She was laid to rest among the graves of some of her beloved gorillas. The mystery of her killing has never been satisfactorily resolved, but her legacy is without question. Today, the Fossey Fund continues the research and conservation work Dian started. The Virunga population of mountain gorillas, which had dwindled to around 250 individuals by the early 1980s, has more than doubled. Their recovery would have been music to the ears of Dian Fossey, whose final words written in her diary were, "When you realize the value of all life, you dwell less on what is past and concentrate more on the preservation of the future."
Ina Coolbrith's journey to California as a young girl in 1851 marked the beginning of an extraordinary life. Born Josephine Smith, she left her past behind to carve out a new path, one filled with creativity and a deep love for the arts.
Despite early challenges, Ina became a literary force in San Francisco, mingling with renowned writers like Mark Twain and contributing her poetry to influential publications. Her work helped shape California's cultural identity, adding depth and character to the state's literary landscape.
Later, as Oakland's first librarian, Ina used her position to inspire young minds, including future icons like Jack London. She understood that the written word could transform lives, and she championed access to books and knowledge for all.
And even through personal losses and the devastation of the 1906 earthquake, Ina continued her creative journey. Today, her legacy as California's first poet laureate stands a testament to her resilience and lasting influence on our culture.
O foolish wisdom sought in books, O aimless fret of household tasks, O chains that bind the hand and mind, a fuller life my spirit asks. These are the words of poet Ina Donna Coolbrith, who came to California as a child in 1852. The life she found here could hardly have been fuller. Ina was born Josephine Donna Smith, niece of the Mormon religious leader Joseph Smith. Seeking to leave her past behind her, Ina's mother fled the Midwest by wagon train for California, bringing Ina and her siblings. Ina began composing poetry at the age of 11, and soon her poems were being published in newspapers like the Los Angeles Star. Following a short and unhappy marriage, marked by abuse and the death of her infant, Ina moved from Los Angeles to San Francisco. There she continued publishing poems and quickly fell in with a literary crowd, including the writers Bret Harte, Joaquin Miller, and Samuel Clemens, better known as Mark Twain. With Harte as its editor, Ina became a regular contributor of poems to Overland Monthly, a magazine that helped raise California's profile in the literary world. Ina's star was rising, but supporting her mother and seriously ill sister was more than she could manage on her earnings as a poet. So she moved across the bay to Oakland, where she took a position running the city's library, a post she would keep for the next 19 years. She found the work rewarding, especially because it allowed her to mentor young patrons, like the writer Jack London and the dancer Isadora Duncan. After leaving the library, Ina returned to San Francisco. She was nearly finished with a manuscript that was meant to be partly autobiographical when the great earthquake and fire of 1906 destroyed her home and nearly all her possessions. She never returned to the work, hinting that its revelations about her intimate relationships would cause a scandal. Ina's large circle of prominent friends helped her get on her feet once again in San Francisco's Russian Hill neighborhood, where she hosted salons attended by the leading lights of California arts and letters. In 1919, Ina's status as California's first poet laureate was made official by the state legislature, an honor she held until her death at 86.
Born and raised in Pasadena, Julia Child's adventurous spirit would take her across the globe to Asia, where she served with the Office of Strategic Services and met her husband Paul Child, who introduced her to French cooking.
Once in Paris, Julia studied at Cordon Bleu and co-authored Mastering the Art of French Cooking, sparking America's passion for fine cuisine.
With her unique charm and humor on her award-winning television show, The French Chef, Julia welcomed home cooks into the kitchen, proving French techniques were within everyone's reach.
Julia Child showed America how to cook with joy, a true Californian who transformed kitchens nationwide.
Here's a fun fact. The woman Americans knew for decades as the French chef is actually a Californian. Julia Child was born Julia McWilliams in Pasadena. As a young woman, she had little interest in cooking, but she did have a powerful taste for adventure. When World War II broke out, Julia wanted to join the Women's Army Corps, but at 6'2", she was too tall. So she signed up with the Office of Strategic Services, the forerunner of the CIA. While stationed in Asia, Julia met Paul Child, another OSS officer who would become her husband soon after the war. Paul was a Francophile with a sophisticated palate, and he began to introduce her to the foods he loved. Julia's fate was sealed when Paul took a post with the State Department and the couple moved to Paris. To keep herself occupied, she began taking cooking lessons. In 1951, she graduated from Paris's famous culinary school, Le Cordon Bleu. Soon after, she met Simone Beck and Louisette Berthold, two French women who wanted to write a comprehensive guide to French cuisine for Americans. Together, they published Mastering the Art of French Cooking, a work widely credited with reviving American interest in cooking. The book was a publishing sensation and launched Julia's phenomenal career as a cookbook author.
Hello, I'm Julia Child. Welcome to The French Chef and the first show on our series on French cooking.
But it wasn't only through books that she would make her mark on culinary culture. Julia's ebullient personality was made for television, and with The French Chef, her distinctive voice entered American homes for the first time.
When you flip anything, you just have to have the courage of your convictions, particularly if it's sort of a loose mass like this. Well, that didn't go very well. See, when I flipped it, I didn't.
The ease and naturalness of her presentation gave American home cooks the courage to experiment in the kitchen.
Julia Child presents The Chicken Sisters, Miss Broiler.
Julia would remain a ubiquitous part of the television landscape for decades to come.
And old Madam Hen.
Her long string of television programs would win numerous Emmys and a Peabody Award. And Julia herself would be recognized with both the U.S. Medal of Freedom and the French Legion of Honor. Today, the Julia Child Foundation for Gastronomy and the Culinary Arts continues her legacy, encouraging people to cook, eat, and drink well.
Mitsuye Endo's life and the lives of over 100,000 Japanese Americans were horrifically changed when the events of World War II led to their unjust incarceration.
Rather than remain silent, Mitsuye took a courageous stand. She joined with her colleagues to challenge their undue firing from the DMV in Sacramento. When incarceration camps were established, she became a plaintiff in the landmark case against the government.
Even when offered her freedom, Mitsuye refused to abandon her fight for justice, ultimately winning a Supreme Court decision that affirmed the rights of Japanese Americans.
Mitsuye Endo's unwavering determination not only helped restore dignity to thousands of individuals and families, but it also serves as a reminder that the pursuit of justice often demands sacrifice and resilience.
Mitsuye Endo was living a normal life as a clerical worker at the DMV in Sacramento when the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor created a panic over what many presumed to be the mixed loyalty of Japanese Americans. In 1942, she and hundreds of other state workers were fired solely because of their Japanese heritage. Mitsuye joined 62 others in the Japanese American Citizens League in challenging the firings. As the war with Japan escalated, anti-Japanese paranoia intensified, and in accordance with Executive Order 9066, the government began rounding up Japanese Americans on the West Coast and isolating them in detention centers. Mitsuye and her family were first brought to an assembly center near Sacramento before being moved to a camp in Tule Lake, California, and eventually to the Topaz camp in central Utah, where she would remain until the war was nearly over. With Mitsuye and all other Japanese Americans on the West Coast imprisoned, the focus was no longer on the state's dismissal of workers from their jobs. So attorney James Purcell shifted to challenging the incarceration of loyal Japanese Americans as unconstitutional. He needed an ideal plaintiff for the case, and he found one in Mitsuye, who had never even been to Japan. When Purcell asked her if he could file a petition on her behalf, challenging the government's detention of Japanese American citizens, Mitsuye hesitated. She was an intensely private person who had never sought attention. But as she later said in the oral history she provided for posterity, when she understood that her decision would affect the lives of thousands of others, she knew she had no choice. Purcell filed the petition on July 12, 1942. While the case proceeded through the legal system, the government offered to free Mitsuye, hoping to weaken her case, but she refused to leave Topaz until the Supreme Court ruled on her petition, which it did in her favor in December 1944. Mitsuye's was the only successful challenge to the incarceration. One day before the court's decision, the government proclaimed that loyal Japanese Americans could return to the West Coast. Mitsuye's sacrifice returned a measure of justice to 120,000 Americans whose freedom had been taken from them. Mitsuye was only 22 years old when she took up the cause of justice. She is now remembered for her role in ending the unconstitutional imprisonment of American citizens of Japanese descent.
Tina Turner electrified the world with her powerful voice and dynamic performances, becoming an enduring symbol of resilience and empowerment.
With a career that began in the 1960s alongside her husband Ike, Tina's raw talent and charisma captivated audiences. But it was her 1984 album, Private Dancer, that solidified her status as a rock and roll legend, introducing her to a whole new generation.
Despite professional and personal challenges, including Ike's violent abuse, Tina turned her struggles into strength, inspiring countless women to reclaim their narratives and find their voices.
Inducted twice into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, Tina Turner's legacy as the queen of rock and roll lives on, reminding us all of the transformative power of music and perseverance.
By the time Anna Mae Bullock moved from the tiny town of Nutbush, Tennessee, to swinging Los Angeles in the early 1960s, she already had success on the R&B charts under her stage name, Tina Turner. She and her husband and musical partner Ike steadily built the Ike and Tina Turner Revue into one of the most electric R&B acts of the era. In a pop landscape dominated by demure girl groups, Tina Turner's raw vocals and explosive choreography had more in common with the sweat-drenched R&B of James Brown, which made for eye-popping performances on TV shows. The act caught the attention of star-making producer Phil Spector, who signed the group to his label and produced their first hit single.
When I was a little girl, I had a rag doll, the only doll I've ever owned.
River Deep, Mountain High showcased Tina Turner's innately dramatic singing style. Her ability to present herself as strong and vulnerable in the same breath. Too black for white stations and too pop for R&B, the record topped out at number 88 on the Billboard charts in the US. But it was a bigger hit in England and led to an invitation to open for the Rolling Stones on their 1966 tour of the UK, beginning a long association with the band. Ike and Tina were a popular touring act throughout the 60s and 70s, but the relationship was not what it appeared on stage. Ike grew more abusive as his addiction to cocaine worsened, and in 1976, Tina found the courage to leave. Mired in debt from the legal mess of their split, Tina launched her career as a solo artist, but she largely failed to break through during the eras of disco and punk.
What's love got to do with it?
Until, that is, 1984's chart-topping album, Private Dancer. The record showcased Tina's power to a whole new generation of fans in the age of MTV. Once again, Tina Turner was one of the biggest stars in American music, and success went beyond the concert stage.
But he's just a raggedy man.
In 1985, she starred in Mad Max Beyond Thunderdome, a box office smash that earned Tina positive reviews, and her 1986 autobiography, I, Tina, became a bestseller. Inducted twice into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, Tina Turner will always be remembered as the queen of rock and roll and an inspirational figure for women around the world.
The path to Olympic gold wasn't easy for Vicki Draves, but she persisted. Born in San Francisco to a Filipino chef and an English maid, she didn't start swimming until she was 10.
Vicki faced unjust barriers due to her background, but found a dedicated coach who saw her potential, creating a club with her as its only member. And despite the obstacles, she rose to the national level within just a few short years.
And in 1948, after years of training, Victoria became the first woman to win 2 Olympic gold medals in diving and the first Asian American woman to earn Olympic gold.
Victoria Draves' story is one of resilience and determination, breaking barriers and paving the way for future generations.
For Olympic diver Victoria Manalo Draves, victory was never going to be an easy target. The daughter of a Filipino chef and an English maid, she couldn't afford swimming lessons until she was 10 years old, very late to start serious training. 6 years later, she was introduced to the coach at the exclusive Fairmont Hotel Swimming and Diving Club. The coach told her he couldn't admit a Filipina into the hotel club, but he agreed to create his own club with Vicki as its only member. For competitions, she had to drop her father's Filipino last name, Manalo, and enter meets under her mother's maiden name, Taylor. Vicki focused on diving for most of the next 3 years, and it paid off in 1943, when she came in third at her first national meet in Indiana. After Pearl Harbor, times were challenging for Asian Americans of any ethnicity. Overt racism added to the stress of competitive training for Vicki and her friend and fellow diver, Korean-American Sammy Lee. It was Sammy who introduced Vicki to Lyle Draves, the Oakland-based diving coach who would become her husband. Lyle would often say that Vicki had gold written all over her. Still, he recognized that to compete at the highest level, Vicki would have to relearn the fundamentals of the sport. So together they began a program of intensive training that resulted in 4 national titles through 1948. Through hard work and tenacity, she had overcome obstacles to emerge as one of the nation's top female divers. After being suspended for 12 years during the Second World War, the 1948 Olympic Games brought the world together in London for an emotional renewal of international competition. Vicki had not placed first in the Olympic trials, and she was not expected to beat the top women divers in London.
The Olympics take to the water. Mrs. Vicki Draves of Los Angeles, trained by her husband.
But with medals on the line, she performed magnificently in the final competition. She brought home 2 gold medals, one for the 10-meter platform and one for the 3-meter springboard. In doing so, she became the first American woman to win 2 gold medals in diving, and the first Asian American woman to win Olympic gold. Vicki Manalo Draves was inducted into the International Swimming Hall of Fame 25 years after she dove into Olympic history and the hearts of sports fans everywhere.
As we conclude, we want to extend our heartfelt gratitude to the loved ones of the honorees for helping us tell the remarkable stories of the 18th class of the California Hall of Fame.
The lasting impact of these inductees has and will continue to inspire future generations to push the boundaries of what's possible.
From Julia Child's culinary genius to Tina Turner's powerful voice, this class reminds us to be creative, fight for each other, and strive for justice and equality. So as we reflect on their stories, let them serve as a call to action for each of us to uplift the women in our lives and center their stories.
And with that, we're honored to induct the 18th class into the California Hall of Fame and ensure California's spirit and legacy of resilience, creativity, and inclusivity continues to thrive.